Okay, so we'll get going. So hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for the FoodCloud Academy and Danone first webinar. I am Emer Delahunty. I am the Community Development Manager here at FoodCloud, and I'm going to moderate today's webinar. FoodCloud recently launched FoodCloud Academy, which is an education pillar with an ambition to empower individuals with knowledge and the tools that foster a deeper understanding of the opportunity of surplus food to support our communities while also reducing food waste. So today is our first FoodCloud Academy webinar to be delivered under this pillar. Danone and FoodCloud have partnered together to develop a nutrition education program for community organizations using surplus food. Danone's worldwide mission is to bring health through food to as many people as possible. In Ireland, Danone's health-focused portfolio spans 4 categories: essential dairy and plant-based products, specialised nutrition, including early life and medical nutrition, and waters, and includes leading brands such as Nutricia, Aptimal and Cowengate, Actimel, Activia, Alpro, Evian, and Volvic. Danone is the first company in Ireland to work with FoodCloud to provide nutrition education. In the last year, Danone's in-house nutritionists and dietitians have developed 12 nutritionally balanced recipes to help organizations in our network to make the most of surplus food. So you can find these recipes on our website under the Learn section or through our monthly newsletters, Food for Thought. Over the next 2 years, Danone will share more tailored recipes and nutritional information for community organizations, as well as an additional expert-led webinars like this one to support you to do more with surplus food. This webinar on healthy aging and nutrition will go through the direct link between nutrition and the aging process, with tips on how to support healthy nutrition for older adults in your own services. Before we begin, we will put up a quick survey to help us understand the level of awareness that you all feel you have in terms of the nutritional needs of community members. This survey will remain open throughout the event, so please complete it before the end if you can. Now, I'm going to hand you over to Orla Clancy. Orla is the Nutritia Care dietitian for Danone and will present on behalf of Danone's team of nutritionists and dietitians today. I'll hand over to you there, Orla.
Perfect. Thanks, Emer, and thanks for FoodCloud for letting me speak today on, as I said, nutrition for healthy aging. So firstly, just a little bit about my role at Nutricia. So Nutricia, as Emer said, is one of the brands of Danone, and through the nutrition range of services and medical nutritional products, Danone helps to ensure the specific nutritional requirements of consumers and patients of all ages are met. I suppose more specifically, I work as part of the Nutrition Care team, which you can see there, and it's a collection of dietitians, speech and language therapists, and tissue viability nurses. So we would go into nursing homes, and we cover all of Ireland, our nursing homes that we attend in Ireland. And more specifically, the dietetic service we provide supports nursing homes in meeting the nutritional needs of residents. So really what that looks like is I would go in and do a detailed nutritional assessment of residents. I'd provide care plans and individualized recommendations then following these assessments. I would also work with my colleagues, more specifically the speech and language therapists, in how to optimize nutrition and hydration of these residents. And I also support in menu analysis and provide diet sheets for special diets of certain residents that may be needed. So that's just a broad overview on how I'm linked in with Danone and Nutricia. But I suppose getting straight into it and why you're all here today. Sorry, my screen seems to be stuck. Not ideal. Is that still working for any? Oh, here we go.
Yeah, it's just
sorry, yeah. So really what is good nutrition? The talk will be outlining top tips for good nutrition and healthy aging, food pyramid, fluid and malnutrition. It's a bit slow in moving. Okay. So firstly, what is good nutrition? So I think in terms of when we think of good nutrition, there's a lot of recent information, especially surrounding diet culture and social media. Things 1 minute bread is bad for you, next thing fats are in or bread's in. It's very confusing, and there's a lot of scaremongering in line with nutrition recently, and everyone seems to have an opinion about what good nutrition is. So really, I like to pair it back to basics and looking at that keyword of what is a balanced diet. Well, it should really be a diet that has enough energy in line with your physical activity. So really then looking at your starchy foods at each meal, aiming for around 5 servings of fruit and vegetables daily, staying strong by including protein-rich foods each day, especially with older adults, we're thinking about that bone health and preventing fractures. So we're thinking calcium and vitamin D here. We're looking at fluids and we're thinking of variety. So by having variety in the diet, we're including a wide range of nutrients, vitamins, and minerals, which are key in different bodily processes that we need. But I will go through all of these in detail throughout the talk. So why is this important, and why is this important for service users that you may encounter? Well, it's important to eat well to ensure everyone's body is in the best position to help repair and rebuild damaged tissue, to maintain function of vital bodily processes. So our organs, our brain, our heart, our liver, our lungs, all these require us to eat well to ensure that vital bodily processes are maintained. And I think over the last few years, it's really been evident to show that we need good nutrition, especially when COVID was around and is still around in our community. It's important to eat well to ensure that we're in the best body position to help fight infections. So when we do pick it up, and if we do pick up these infections, that we can fight them off, and the effects aren't as severe and symptoms may be lessened due to good nutritional intake. But that seems like a lot of work, and you're saying, okay, I need fluids, I need fiber, I need protein, I need to be active, I need calcium, vitamin D. But most like when we get up and we brush our teeth or we tie our shoelaces in the morning, we don't think of it. And the good news is most of us are already doing a lot of these things without thinking. So it's half the battle, and it's about picking out kind of what we might be achieving that we can really amplify. But a lot of these things, we're subconsciously doing these already in our day-to-day lives. And much like while the food pyramid and eating a balanced diet can help us achieve and help maintain good nutrition, our nutritional demands change throughout our life cycle. So much like me, I have different requirements I did when I was growing, or my 5-year-old cousin versus my male partner. And similarly, so when looking at aging and the aging process, we need to know what to be aware of and what is particular importance, as we get older. So there are key nutrients that we need to address and look at when we are older. And more like our age, also during times of stress, injury, illness, so when we're feeling poorly at any point of our lives, this also changes what our body needs, and the food we need and how we can get the most out of our nutrition as well. So this is also a factor that we need to consider. It's not easy. So then more specifically, while looking at nutrition and the aging process, there are natural changes that we don't have control over that occur that impacts what we get from the food and how we use it. So our body naturally can start to find it difficult to use the nutrients from food as well as it used to. And additionally, our senses tend to be dulled, such as taste and smell. Our appetite may become smaller. Our muscle tone naturally decreases. So it's really important, to get older adults out at being active. So we having that use it or lose it approach. And this may impact, as our muscle tone naturally decreases, this impacts our strength and mobility. So it's really focusing on how can we keep older adults out independent as long as possible, because that's ultimately what they want. They want, to lift their grandkids. We want, to keep them independent and in their own homes as long as possible. And even the muscle in our gut loses tone, and this can impact things such as constipation, and our immune systems can become more vulnerable. So while that sounds all very negative, and unfortunately that's just naturally without us even having control over, there are things that we can control over. And I go back to kind of the really basic, and I show this and I kind of smile because I think this is a pillar in most people's childhood. The food pyramid's been around, for so long in different forms, and people are aware of it. But what it is, it changes throughout time, but it shows how um, basically what we should base our food off of, and how our diets, what we should have, the serving size of each food, and what we need more of in our diets, and is a nice guide to show, what we need to base our food off of, and to achieve a balanced diet when we talk of that buzzword. So we start up with the base of the food pyramid. And I say the base is really vegetables, salads, fruit, and that's really the base of the food pyramid, should be what we base our meals off of. So with each layer of the food pyramid, really, it goes through kind of the serving sizes you should be having, and really with fruits, vegetables, and salads, we need to be aiming to eat 5 or more portions daily. Now, this is a rough guide, but for this one, the more the better with your fruit and vegetables. It is tale as old as time, really. But why they're important is really because they're really lower in calories, so they have that role with weight maintenance. They're high in fiber, so they keep us fuller for longer. And fiber is really good for helping aid normal bowel function, which is really important for those older adults. And they're full of vitamins and minerals, which can help lower our risk of things like cancer, certain cancers, stroke, and heart disease. When we look at fruit, vegetables, and salads, some top tips are really to stock up on fruit and veg. So frozen, tinned, fresh, all count. And I know, considering money costs, frozen can be a really cheap alternative, or tinned. But when we're looking at tin, just making sure they're in juice, not in syrup, because this adds kind of extra sugars. And vegetables should be in fresh spring water rather than brine, because brine adds the salt. But in terms of cost savings, frozen, berries can be extortionate prices, and they go off quite readily. So having frozen and putting it in your porridge in the morning, or even in some fresh yogurt, are really, cost effective ways of keeping and preserving your fruit and veg as well. Think variety. As I mentioned before, variety really is the spice of life. So trying to include different colors of the rainbow, and trying to challenge yourself with this, because with different colors, they contain different nutrients, vitamins, and minerals, that are really beneficial to each organ and different vital bodily processes. Um, Again, choosing food and drink rich in vitamin C. So vitamin C is great to help absorb iron in our body. And what iron does is it helps keeps our cells oxygenated. So older adults tend to be at higher risk of iron deficiency anemia. And what happens with iron deficiency anemia is residents tend to, or older adults can tend to feel, or anyone can tend to feel um, fatigued, breathlessness, um, and tend to find it harder to eat. So it gives them a bit more energy. So vitamin C is really important here to help absorb iron in the body. Um, so then you might be thinking, God, five, trying to get up to 5 to 7 servings in the day when I'm only eating maybe one or two is very challenging. So it's about looking at what you're having day to day. And I think this is, what I try to encourage people to do, is not changing dramatically their diet. It's about looking at what we're doing day to day, and what we can add, or what we can add to our diet, really. So if you're having porridge or cereal in the morning, adding a berry or a glass of orange juice, that's already 2 servings added. Your lunch, adding a cup of homemade soup if you're having a sandwich, putting lettuce, cucumber, and tomato in. So that's already two more. If you're having your dinner, if you're having spaghetti bolognese at home, or whoever's at home having spaghetti bolognese, having the carrots, spinach, onion, tin chopped tomatoes, and sauce, like doing that just adds 1, 2, 3, 4 if portions of vegetables in the day. So it's really practical ways of looking at what you're doing. I don't think it's achievable to dramatically change one's lifestyle. So it's by looking and stripping back what we can do in our day-to-day life. If you're having a snack, a low-fat yogurt, adding a bit of fruit. So that's another um, portion and serving there. So by adding all those up, you're getting 2 to 3 servings of fruit and vegetables, and having around 5 to 6 servings of veg there, giving you and exceeding the recommended serving sizes of 7 to 9 servings. So it is achievable if we just kind of take that time to look at what we're doing and thinking about what we're eating daily. Other practical ideas, I'm not going to list out everyone, but even for breakfast, I know my parents at home like like a more savory breakfast, and I've even gotten them to start adding more fruit and veg by just adding mushrooms and tomatoes to their cooked breakfast. So it's about working and seeing what could work for your own personal preference. For lunch, having vegetable soup, as I said, or taking a side salad, things that you can add in rather than taking away. Some dinner, even including at least 2 types of vegetables with your evening meal. It is that typical Irish thing of having meat and 2 veg. It is that simple, having 2 types of veg. Or if you're having um, a, a curry or a casserole, try adding some veg into that instead of having it very meat based. If you're having a dessert or a snack, I'm a big fan of keeping a well-stocked fruit bowl. So having it out in front of everyone, you're more likely to grab something then when you see it, because no one wants to see food go off or food go to waste, especially if they paid for it. So you're more tempted to grab that if you see it in front of you, or if you're heading out the door. So then moving on to the next layer or base of the food pyramid, as I say, is cereals, bread, potatoes, pasta, and rice. And I think over the last few years, there has really been a scaremongering about cereals and breads and this shelf because of things like the Atkins diet and Special K diet and everything like that. But we need carbohydrates, and it is our body's main source of energy. When carbohydrates break down, they break down into glucose, and this is what our brain primarily runs off of. So for good brain health and to provide us with energy in line with our physical activity, we really need some cereals, breads, potatoes, pasta, or carbohydrates really. Um, but what is important to consider with this shelf is the type of carbohydrates and the portion size. So really, we want to choose carbohydrates that are higher in fiber, and this is important for our gut health, our heart health, and it has a role in weight maintenance. And what I like to think of how I describe fiber is I like people to think of Weet-Bix. So when they're having Weet-Bix, you add kind of your milk or your water in the morning to it, and it expands and it gets heavy. So this is really what happens to fiber when you eat it in your diet. It expands, it gets heavy, and this is how it helps with regular bowel motion. So it helps bulk up the stool and keeps it easy to pass. But when you're thinking of your fiber, you really need to think of your fluids. So much like that Weet-Bix, you really need to add in the fluids to keep that bulk in that stool and to keep your bowel habits regular. I'll go into that in a bit more later on. Again, with a lot of older adults, they tend to add raw bran is a tradition sprinkled on food or in the breakfast. I would advise to avoid raw bran sprinkled on food. It actually impacts the absorption of iron and calcium, which, as I mentioned earlier, iron deficiency can lead to anemia, leading to people feeling fatigued. And calcium, we really want calcium for good bone health to minimize risk of fracture in older adults. But as well with this shelf, it's really a good way of starting every day with how we need to go on. So by having a high fiber breakfast, this really sets us up for the day. So having something like your Weet-Bix or your porridge or a whole grain cereal or a whole grain slice of bread is a really good opportunity to get that fiber into our diet. So the recommended dietary allowance of fiber is 25 grams. But 8 out of 10, it's been shown that 8 out of 10 people in Ireland don't achieve this recommendation. Just because it's simply by, we go about our daily routine, but we need to look at kind of incorporating those words of multigrain and whole grain cereals and carbohydrates into our diet. So as well, I mentioned earlier being mindful of portion size of carbohydrates. So we really need to look at, a portion size of pasta, rice, potatoes. I think people are shocked to know that it's a fist of a woman's fist, and as well, a portion of carbohydrate. For bread, it's one pound. So it's really achievable. Just incorporating one serving at each meal, you're already achieving your 3 to 5 servings there. In terms of how to increase, I like to be practical in how to increase fiber in our diet. So looking at if you're having cornflakes, Rice Krispies in the morning, switching to maybe porridge, wheat bix, shredded wheat, switching that white wholemeal bread to more your whole grains and multigrains, as I said. If you're having mashed potato with no skin, adding on the skin, or having something like sweet potato with the skin on, or baby potatoes. So even I have switched to even making shepherd's pie and leaving the skin on and just mashing potatoes with the skin on, and really just simple tips and tricks that we can do daily just to increase that fiber to aid in heart health and gut health and keeping those bowels regular. Looking at white rice and white pasta, switching to maybe the whole wheat and brown basmati rice. So the next shelf then, milk, yogurt, and cheese. And this is one that's really important, for those older adults. And one that we would really need to look at. So why this is so important is it's a good source of protein, calcium, and vitamins. So in terms of protein, it maintains muscle mass. So by maintaining muscle mass, we're keeping more mobile, minimizing that risk of falls. For calcium, then it's for bone health. So even if a fall does happen, we're reducing that risk of fracture with those falls. We're also thinking of dental health here and maintaining good dentition. So when looking at this shelf, it's 3 to 4 servings. However, if you're finding, an older adult isn't achieving, or yourself aren't achieving those servings, a daily 500 milligram calcium supplement is generally recommended in older adults who consume less than one of these portions daily. So in terms of your milk, you're going for kind of looking really for the low fat or skimmed milk, have just the same nutrition in terms of they've equal amounts of calcium and protein. Why they're different is they've lower amounts of saturated fat. So they're equally as nutritious, they just have less fat. And to look for your fortified options. So by looking for your fortified options, what I mean is, added vitamin D. So vitamin D works alongside calcium in helping absorb calcium. So really absorbing the calcium and getting those benefits for the bone health. In terms of if for whatever reason and whatever personal preference, if someone or medical condition cannot take dairy and they're taking a plant-based drink instead, read the label and making sure that it's fortified with added calcium, because some own brands in supermarkets will not have added calcium, and then you're really not getting that benefit for your bone health. In terms of yogurt, go for low fat or natural yogurts with no added sugar. So this is all the benefits of the calcium and the protein, just the no added sugar. In terms of cream, looking for a single instead of double cream, and substituting for low fat natural yogurt when possible to get the most out of your nutrition. So I think a lot of people, when I recommend, they say, oh, cream with my dessert instead, or yogurt instead of my cream with my dessert. It takes time, but I have converted a few people. So it is possible. It's just about training your palate. And as I said, breaking that routine. In terms of cheese, choosing really less often than milk or yogurt, maximum twice a week, as this can be quite high in saturated fat. So it has that impact on heart health. It can raise blood pressure, it can raise cholesterol. And most people are shocked to hear that when I recommend cheese, a serving of cheese is your 2 thumbs put together. And I think people think of different things like they think of cheese boards or anything like that. And it's hard to get just two two thumbs worth of cheese in a serving. But really, simple tips such as grating instead of slicing really controls this portion size as well. As I mentioned there before, vitamin D helps absorb the calcium and gets that maximum impact for bone health. And most people in Ireland, unfortunately, it's called the sunshine vitamin. And in Ireland, we do not, unfortunately, get enough vitamin D from sunlight. And our diet, it's very hard to get it from our diet, as there are only a select few foods that really contain vitamin D, such as oily fish, eggs, or fortified foods, such as foods that have added vitamin D to it, so cereals, yogurts, and milk. And that's why I mentioned looking for that kind of fortified milk option. So it is recommended that all older adults, all people in Ireland need to really supplement, but for adults aged 65 years plus, 15 microgram supplement. So that could be a multivitamin, a calcium and vitamin D supplement, or a vitamin D only supplement with vitamin D of 15 micrograms is recommended. But now, taking this with a pinch of salt, this talk is a general for generally well certain conditions and medical advice. Listen always to your doctor. If you are prescribed something else or something else by your dietitian or doctor, always follow that in line with it. So if you are recommended over 15 micrograms, then continue with that. The next shelf, proteins. So this again is one really important for older adults. As we age, our protein requirements increase, and we need a more protein dense diet to prevent muscle loss. So we really need to look at high quality protein foods to stimulate muscle synthesis and to keep us mobile. As I mentioned earlier, sometimes as naturally when we age, our appetite tends to get smaller. So this is when dairy tends to come in and is a good option as a snack. So those yogurts, if we don't have a great appetite for our main meals. So looking at adding variety to our protein, protein helps the body to grow and repair itself. So looking at fish, beans and pulses, nuts and seeds and eggs. So by looking at fish, fresh, frozen or canned fish all count as a good source of protein. More so looking at kind of canned fish in natural spring water rather than in brine, as these are high in salt. Oily fish are really good for omega-3 fatty acids. So omega-3 fatty acids are good fats in helping our heart health, our brain health. So it's recommended to have 2 servings of oily fish in a week to really get the benefits for our heart health. In terms of beans and pulses, so these are things like our lentils, our chickpeas, things like that, our kidney beans. They're naturally low in fat, and I suppose out of all the protein, when we think of meat and fish, they are expensive. And when you go out to the supermarket, they're quite beans and pulses. You can get a tin of chickpeas, I think, in Tesco for like 59 cents. So they're healthy and cheap alternative. They bulk up our meals. They're high in fiber, so they're really filling and nutritious ways of kind of bulking up our meals. And they're very high in protein as well. Similar to nuts and seeds, they're also high in fiber. They contain healthy unsaturated fats, so the good type of fats that we need in our diet. But compared to proteins and carbohydrates, fats tend to be higher in calories just per unit size. So it's important to limit these to a handful daily. And I think before when I was talking about this with the gentleman, he was like, "Oh, great! I can have my Manhattan nuts when I go down to the pub." But it's important to choose the unsalted, unroasted nuts, because when we add salt and we roast them, it tends to kind of add in those extra salt, which will raise our blood pressure and have an impact on our heart health. In terms of eggs, this is another kind of trend that was almost a scaremongering thing as well, looking at cholesterol in eggs. And there was a flag going around that increasing the cholesterol in the eggs would increase cholesterol, when it's actually saturated fat in our diet increases cholesterol more. So there's actually no limit into how much eggs we can eat. Now, I say that with a pinch of salt. I'm not encouraging everyone to go out having 9 eggs a day, but everything in, as I said, in moderation. But there isn't. I think it was saying that you could only have one egg or 3 eggs in a week. Eggs are great sources of protein, but it is mindful of best to cook without kind of that fat. As it, when we add in that fat, that's when the saturated fat becomes in. So using methods that don't add in fat, so boiling or poaching in water. In terms of meat, they're good sources. Red meat in particular, a good source of iron. But it's being mindful again of the type of meat and the cooking method to choose in terms of how we can reduce the saturated fat in the type of meat. So choosing lean cuts of meat, trimming the fat before cooking, removing the poultry skin, and the cooking methods. So again, trying not to add in that fat. So grilling, baking, roasting, poaching instead of frying, limiting that salty processed meat. So that's again, benefit for heart health. So limiting um, those salty processed meats, such as the sausages, the rashers, and the ham. So things like the fry in the morning, trying and incorporating maybe more vegetables into things if you are having something like fry, and replace half the meat in your dinner with other sources of protein like kidney beans, as I mentioned, or chickpeas, stuff like that. And maybe trying one meat-free day in the week. It's great to see over the last few years that more places are having vegetarian options and more vegetarian recipes are coming out to help support people with that. Next shelf, looking at fats, spreads, and oils. Now we all need fats like carbohydrates. We all need fats in our diet, but it is mindful to be the portion consumed. So looking at having small amounts of those reduced fat spreads, um, looking at kind of or unsaturated oils. So in Ireland, we're great sources of rapeseed oil. I know a lot of people buy olive oil and that's been thing, but in Ireland, rapeseed oil is just as good as an unsaturated oil, or vegetable oils or sunflower oils. Um, Again, being mindful of reducing our portion of these. We need these in very small amounts. So looking at our cooking methods, as I said, in terms of like your proteins or your eggs, trying grilling, baking, steaming, boiling, stir frying, so things that don't really require added fats to be added. I think looking out for dressings and sauces are a big one where people are caught. So when we go out, asking maybe for dressings on the side, um, and looking for the sauces. So rich, creamy sauces can be things that kind of really add in the fat. So asking for maybe looking at more tomato-based sauces are beneficial because number one, they increase kind of our vegetables intake and they increase our fiber, but they also reduce those creamy sauces that have increased fats. And I mentioned before, omega-3 fish oils are really, really beneficial. So 1 to 2 weekly. If you're not a great fan of oily fish, which I know a lot of people aren't, you can get a fish oil supplement of 450 to 1,000 micrograms. EPA to DPA is what you're looking for, but they are more expensive. So and they're not utilized in your body as good as eating the whole fish. But also vegetarian sources such as kind of those nuts and seeds that I mentioned before are good sources of omega-3s as well. I smile when I show this slide because I think people say, oh, these are the things there's no recommended serving size in terms of the top food, the top shelf, or the foods high in fat, salt, or sugar. And someone shouted out before, oh, the good stuff, or you're making me hungry. But why these foods are really maximum 1 to 2 times weekly, there's no recommended servings for these, is because they tend to be higher in sugar, salt, and saturated fat, which do contribute to weight gain, high cholesterol, and high blood pressure. Now, I don't like to be the big bad wolf. There is a place, for these as food is more than just nutrition. It's there as a social cue. It's there to be enjoyed with friends and family. But they do, just to be mindful of, they have little nutritional value in terms of the protein that's really important, especially as we age. Lower in fiber, especially as we age, keep our bowel patterns regular, and vitamins and minerals. They often, as well, when we consume these, displace other foods more important from the shelves of the food pyramid. And if you can think of, I mentioned before, fiber keeps you feeling fuller for longer. Um, and if you think about it, I like to use the classic of Pringles catchphrase of once you pop, you can't stop, because you can keep eating Pringles, but if you think of something like a banana, you get that fiber, so you would be able to eat 3 bananas. Well, you would, but you would feel fuller quite quickly versus getting a full tub of Pringles in. So choosing maybe the healthier alternatives and making slow, gradual change. If you have a lot of these in your diet, or people are eating a lot of these, then it's about making that gradual change, and understanding your triggers. So what can maybe, is it when you're feeling tired that something, you might reach for one of these, like a packet of crisps or a fizzy drink, um, and making, as I said, having that fruit bowl out instead, making more nutritious choices more readily available to you. So what I would say is enjoy these foods, having them out socially, and that is what I recommend everyone to do. Having these foods, incorporating them. It's not about being miserable, but having these foods, enjoying them, but by making subtle changes, having them out of sight, out of mind, not stocking them at home, or even if someone you're living with is having them, just putting them out of sight, out of reach, so you don't tend to kind of reach for them as much as possible. And I think in Ireland we have that thing of, oh well, even at Christmas time, like stocking up on multiple kind of tins of sweets, or just in case someone calls over. But having them out socially rather than in the home is a way of cutting back on these. Other ways, swapping sugar in your cereal for more fruit and veg, swapping a packet of crisps for maybe that handful of unsalted nuts. Now, I don't really know how realistic swapping chocolate biscuits for a piece of fruit would satisfy that craving, but in terms of something you could do is choosing a plain biscuit instead of that added chocolate, or even having fruit earlier on in the day as a snack would lead you to be more satiated. I don't know how I would be satisfied if someone told me to have a piece of fruit instead of a chocolate biscuit. But just ways of being mindful. Next thing, fluids, really, really important for as we age, especially, and being mindful of the recommendations, the daily recommendations. So looking at fluids, why is fluid important? Well, it prevents dehydration, it reduces the risk of headaches, and reduces the risk of constipation. Being mindful of signs of dehydration. So dark colored urine, passing small amounts of urine, headaches, or lack of ability to concentrate. Don't wait until you feel thirsty to have a drink, because you're more than likely already dehydrated. And as we get older, we miss out on those cues. So these are other signs, to be mindful of. And as you see in the symbols there, all fluids really count towards your fluid requirements. I think before it was mentioned that like caffeinated beverages wouldn't count towards, but no, they all count. So your tea or coffee, just being mindful of caffeine before you go to bed, because this can interrupt quality of sleep. And also tea and coffee around meal time, so having them in between meals and waiting at least 30 minutes, because they can, the tannins is a nutrient in tea and coffee that can impact the absorption of iron. And again, going back to that, minimizing that risk of that anemia that leads us to feeling fatigued and tired. So the recommendations for adults is 8 to 10 glasses for males, or 6 to 8 glasses for females. So 1.6 liters for women and over 2 liters for men. So really, you can say those recommendations, but what does that actually look like? You're really talking about having around 200 mils, really 8 times in the day. Now we can have more than that, of course, in a sitting, but that's what a standard glass would be. So even just carrying like a small water bottle with you, or just with every meal having a glass of water, trying to really fill up maybe in between meals as well with your snacks, and having some sort of milky beverage before you go to bed. So yeah, to summarize, the fantastic five, if I get anyone to take away anything, is just to eat well. Number one, to keep a balanced diet, so we have those strong muscles and bones, to reduce the risk of falls, to keep adults living longer, independent lives. And that's really what we want. We want adults living in the community independently, um, as long as possible, because we do have an aging population. Protein, protein, protein. So eat enough high quality protein. Fiber and fluids. Again, fiber and having fluids to keep bowel patterns regular. Really important to get that 15 microgram vitamin D supplement, and to maintain your best weight and be active. So your best weight should be the weight you can maintain while leading a happy and healthy life, and aiming for around 10 to 15 minutes activity during the day, and some weight bearing exercises. So weight bearing can be anything from your own body weight, or lifting shopping bags, lifting cans, like lifting up kids' toys, or anything like that. It's all weights that we can lift. Finally, I just want to talk a little bit about malnutrition and the stigma around that word. A lot of people have an image, I suppose, even when I'm talking, you might have an image of malnutrition in your head, what that entails. But really, in Ireland, as I mentioned, we have an aging population, which is great. More people are living longer, and aging is a natural process. And as I mentioned earlier, it affects all bodily systems. As I mentioned before, we can be at risk of protein deficiency because our requirements as we age actually increase as we get older. So I always think it's funny when I see, athletes going around, and GA stars even with protein, and protein trends are really cotton on in terms of those kind of protein yogurts and everything like that. But they actually are really important, if not more so, for our older adult population as well as our general population, because our protein requirements are greater as we age, but our ability to use protein is less. So really, that is the perfect storm, because most adults don't tend to increase our protein because we aren't aware that our protein intake increases, and that our protein that we intake isn't readily available to us, and we don't eat enough protein. So and as well, the natural changes that I mentioned earlier occur as well. So our appetite becomes smaller, or we have the taste and smell changes. There may be a little interest in cooking. We mightn't have been the primary person who cooked the meals in the home. And we also have difficulty maybe eating due to different dental issues as we age as well, or difficulty swallowing and chewing. I like to ask this now, I know you can't respond, but in terms of how many people do you think are estimated that might be at risk of malnutrition in Ireland? Even just answering it now in your own head. But it's 140,000 to 150,000. That's a staggering amount of people. And these people aren't aware of it. And you may think, okay, these people are probably in nursing homes or in hospital. 95% of these people are in the community, and that's a scary number. So I mentioned there's a stigma around the word malnutrition, and I really want to break that stigma. Malnutrition is defined as a condition that occurs when a person's diet does not contain enough nutrients to meet the demands of their body. So that really that can be undernutrition, in the terms of nutrient deficiency, or overnutrition in terms of the wrong balance, and excessive nutrients in the wrong balance. So it can be just when the person's diet doesn't contain the right amount of nutrients to meet their demands of their body. And older people, particularly those with other comorbidities, um, like pulmonary destructive disorder, dementia, neurological conditions like multiple sclerosis, motor neuron disease, or those who've had stroke, are at higher risk. But the good news is not doom and gloom again. Malnutrition is largely preventable and treatable. It's not inevitable. It's not an inevitable part of the aging process, and it's relatively simple and inexpensive to treat, especially if detected early. However, the challenge is detecting it. And while I said most of you might have an image in your head of what malnutrition is, in a lot of cases you actually can't physically recognize malnutrition. So when you look at these images, any of these can be at risk of malnutrition, any of these images. So while you may think some are more evident to be at risk of malnutrition, this is why it's a challenge to recognize. But once we do recognize it, it's very simple, and we have processes in place that we can treat it quite effectively. So some ways to identify malnutrition, while the most common is unintentional weight loss, other symptoms to keep an eye out for in those who you deal with, yourself, those you love, weakening or wasting of the muscles, feeling tired or lacking energy, increased vulnerability to infection. So if you feel like people are picking up infections quite frequently and not recovering as quickly as they used to, delayed wound healing or development of pressure sores or pressure ulcers, especially when mobility declines, or dizziness or irritability. So these are other signs that can, be indicative of malnutrition outside of unintentional weight loss. So how do we break the stigma, and how do we, ask these questions? Um, so getting people to think of, have I lost weight without trying over the last 6 months? Um, people don't have scales, don't have access, or haven't gone to the GP in a while and aren't sure. Are clothes fitting looser? One way I look at it, are jewelry, wedding rings, are they fitting looser? Are dentures falling out? These are signs to keep an eye out. Is someone less interested in food kind of becoming a bit, pushing the food away, saying, oh, I had enough? Am I feeling full after small amounts versus normal? And do I feel more fatigued, tired recently? Now, these happen naturally as we age, but I suppose looking kind of if these happen suddenly over the last while, these may be indicative of being at risk of malnutrition. So I always say you're doing okay if you can say I feel well, I'm eating normally, and I have the energy to do things that I enjoy. um, and take action if you say, if you've answered maybe no to some of these, like I'm not finishing the meals, my clothes are fitting looser, I have maybe lost a bit of weight. And if you do notice these signs, reach out to your doctor, a nurse that you're linked in with, or a dietitian, or someone you love, and they'll point you out into to the right direction. So I feel like that was a bit of a whirlwind, and I know there was a lot of information there, but this is being recorded, so you can go back over this. And yeah, now I am happy to answer any questions if anyone has any.
Well, thanks, Orla. So if anybody has any questions, you want to pop them into the chat there. So thanks to Orla. It was a really interesting webinar, Orla. Thank you. It's great to take such a deep dive into the nutritional value of food and some of the great tips on making small changes to our choices that provide extra benefit. My favorite one of those is always leave the skins on veg. So
Yeah.
see that in there. So we know ourselves in FoodCloud that many services for older people really value getting sweet things like dessert items, because older people tend to have a sweet tooth and enjoy those treats. So tips like swapping out the yogurt, the cream for the yogurt, and using canned fruit that's in its own juices rather than in sugar were really valuable. So thank you for those. So there's a lot in there that is important for us all to consider when we are thinking about our own diets, never mind the diets of other vulnerable people in our community. So thanks for that. So I'll just see if there's any questions from today's in today's chat. So we do have one question there around collagen. So is taking collagen beneficial for older adults? And if so, how?
Yeah, so collagen is a relatively new area that's come out recently in terms of even in athletes, it's come around to being like recovery and muscle maintenance. There's not enough evidence of concrete of high quality to suggest that there's any added benefit. There is some more recent evidence to suggest that yes, it might be useful in terms of um, increasing absorption of vitamin D and protein. But in terms of collagen, it's quite expensive as a supplement. So I would really focus on your calcium, your vitamin D, and your protein as a basis before looking at added supplements in terms of older adults, just because there's not enough evidence at the moment to suggest that it would be benefit for the in the longer term for older adults at the moment.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Um, so this one's from myself. So a majority of older people, from our experience anyway, just from doing orders with our warehouses, with services supporting older people, do like do like their traditional food. So the meat to veg kind of meal, and then the crumble and the custard kind of dessert. From a nutritional perspective, do you think that it is important to encourage older people to try new things? Maybe I know you mentioned like a vegetarian meal once a week or something like that. Do you think outside of just trying to get more veg in, do you think that it's important at all for older people to try things outside of their comfort zone?
Yeah, I mean, like it is, as I said, variety is the spice of life because they're getting added benefits from a range of vitamins, minerals there. Now I know some 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 older adults can be quite rigid in their ways, and like even trying to encourage something with like things like nut butters that are very on trend or anything like that. They'd be like, no, no. And it even is just trying to get them to taste it. If they don't want it, it's not about forcing them. It's about then looking at what they're having, like you said, the meat and two veg. Is there another veg they could swap in for that veg instead? Um, is there something like maybe that vegetarian day? Is there a dish that they're having like lasagna? And maybe trying it's great to see over the recent years that there's vegetarian versions of like lasagna, like chili con carne that they can swap in. So the taste is similar, but but it's kind of relatively similar to what they're having. But as I said, it is individual about the to the person. They might be flying it, but as well, it's not about changing their diet completely because they've grown up with that, and that's how they've had. So it's about, is there anything you could add on? Is there anything, in that diet that not about changing it completely, but tailoring it more so, if they're open to it.
Super, thanks for that. Yeah, I don't think that at this point in people's lives that too much change
No,
is
no.
required or needed. Another thing that came to my mind as you were speaking about water was, well, if anybody, not to speak badly of my own parents, but if anybody's like my family, getting some adults, older adults to drink water, like glasses of water, it can be quite, especially cold glasses of water, can be quite challenging. And sometimes, for physical reasons, maybe not kind of their preference to drink a lot of water. Do you have any tips around kind of sneaking water in as a part of their kind of daily nutritional intake, whereby it's not just like drinking a glass of water?
Yeah, yeah. So I completely relate to that because my dad is the worst to take water. And we've tried giving him a bottle, buying a nice bottle for him, but even adding things like some people prefer like cordials or juices, things that make it a bit sweeter, um, that they can sip on throughout the day. Tea, coffee, herbal teas are great even if they're having medication, just even giving something with the medication to help them swallow it. Simple tips like that. And it's not about having one big bottle, even just having a glass, putting a glass down with every meal. It's about really habit forming more than anything. Just ensuring that it's ready after. But like I think like juices, smoothies, milks are more maybe palatable, or if they have a preference for coffee or tea, I think we grew up in an Ireland that is very much tea drinkers, or tea with a snack or a biscuit or something like that. So having, and I know I said reducing those, but there is a place for tea and a biscuit always. So having that's a great way of increasing fluids as well.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think a lot of people would be happy to hear that it doesn't get in the way of tea, and actually that we can be happy to take a couple of cups of tea a day.
Yeah.
Um, So just, I suppose there was some questions around, would we be able to make a copy of the presentation available afterwards? So yeah, as long as Danone are happy, we'll share those slides with you afterwards, but we'll also upload this webinar recording onto our YouTube channel. So you should be able to get that there, and we'll circulate it to you as well. So I tell you, so what we'll do now is I'll just close out. I suppose thanks very much, Orla. Thanks so much for going through all of that with us
Thank
today
you.
and answering our questions. We really appreciate your time and your expertise. And thank
Thank you
you
so
all
much.
who has attended today for joining us at our first webinar. So I'd like to thank Danone and Orla for sharing their expertise with us today. By partnering with FoodCloud on a series of webinars and a bank of nutritional recipes, Danone has created a unique opportunity to connect their nutritional and dietary expertise with you, our community partners, hopefully helping the wider community and delivering meaningful impact through their expertise. So thank you, Danone, and thank you all for attending today. And hopefully we will see you again very soon at one of our next webinars.